Welcome back to Boring Reviews.
Boring land.
Oh, just kidding.
Blasphemer.
Hello,
right.
Boring Review Nation.
Kind of pointless.
We know all things. Hello, Boring Review Nation. Gabe.
Nick.
And we are here today to bring you guys another reaction. Hot off the presses about, it's been a long time since we did a reaction, Nick. I cannot remember the last reaction we did, to be honest with you. We got so busy
Do you mean review?
What did I say? You're killing me. My bad. Review. I can't remember the last review we did. We were so busy with the IPL, man. So busy with cricket. What's the last review? I would venture to say of a film that we both did. Maybe the Great Indian Kitchen.
Yeah, probably
Was that it?
one. I was going to say Drishyam too, but I think Great Indian Kitchen came before that. But it's definitely been a long time, that's for sure. And I feel like we always say this every review we do. But, you know, it takes a while, but no excuses here. We are excited to review this film. This is a film that has been very consistently requested, especially on our community page when we talk about movies to check out. And we are looking at a movie, and we're going to be talking about a movie called Asuran. That's the way I'm going to say it. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to say it. But this is a film that came out in 2019, and it is directed by Vetri Maaran. It is based on Vikai by Pumani, and it stars Dhanush and Manju Warrior. Now, Dhanush is, and I hope I'm saying that right, he's a big star, superstar, actually.
Right.
And I'm excited to be able to finally check out one of his films from beginning to end. And looking at his age, he's just about a month or two younger than me, so we're about the same age, so that's pretty cool. Right. He's accomplished a few more things in the movie world than I have, and that's okay. But, I mean, this guy, he plays the starring role, and it's crazy because, unless I'm mistaken, it has been about 2 months since I've seen this. Gabe recently watched it. But, unless I'm mistaken, he plays both the roles of his younger self and his older self. And I thought, without having to add crazy makeup or this or that, I thought they did a really good job of being very believable that he was the younger self and the older self. I'm not sure if he just has one of those faces, but I thought it was really good.
I was going to say, he did a really good job like that. The guy's a chameleon, you know what I mean? Like a Brad Pitt. You can never really tell how old this dude is, right? He could play a really young role or older role. And in this movie, he did both. He did a really good job. It was the first time I had seen him, and in anything that I can remember, he was really good as well. You know what? Manju Warrior, she was the wife, and I tell you what, she played that perfectly. That perfect role of being borderline. Anyone that's married, and I'm going to be cautious here, tread water. We have that wife who we love, but that sometimes can get on our nerves. Okay, and she played that role to a T. There are certain things that
can challenge us,
and there were certain things that upset me about her, but she played the right role in this film, and then I understood it, and I was like, oh, as the film went along, yeah, this movie was very, very interesting. And the first thing I'm going to say, it's not for the kiddos. Right now, don't watch it with your kiddos. Luckily, I didn't watch it with any of my kiddos because there's a few graphic scenes there where, bro, they have bodies, man. A body on the ground. I was like, oh, my gosh. And it was just like, it's one thing to see, like, hey, a vampire film. Like, I just recently watched the Army of the Dead, right? That's not vampire, that's the zombies, you know, heads get blown off, whatever, you know, it's like more fictional, so it doesn't bother you as much. But when this is, even though it's a film, you still portraying a real dead body. It really, bro, it affected me. I'm sitting there like, man, I was watching this with Savannah, and she was like, oh, I can't even watch the scene. I was like, babe, it's tough. But it was not just thrown in there for the sake of throwing it in there, gratuitous violence. It was thrown in there to get that emotional impact that we knew we were going to need. And to then understand, is it Pachamo? Pachamos, is that how you pronounce her name? Manju's character's name. To understand her motivation, why she was so angry, why she was willing to further risk her family. And man, I just want to get into it. Like they said, I just recently watched it, but basically we're talking about the quarrel of two families, right? The wealthy landowners and the poor landowners, and they're basically having a land dispute, right? Where the richer guys were coming to build like a ditch somewhere in their land that would have diverted the water and essentially killed all the crops. We're talking about Dhanush's character, Siva. He's not home at the time this happens. His wife is home, and this was one of the first things that upset me when it happened. She comes out and starts yelling and spazzing out, and she pulls out a stick and puts it to the dude's throat. Now, what do you think they're gonna do? Okay, like I get it. They trespassed on their property. They're trying to kill their crops, whether unintentionally or intentionally. But the minute she did that, it escalated. Right? The younger brother goes and runs and gets the older brother. The older brother comes and he plays down the smackdown on these dudes. But these are your neighbors. All right. Think about the Hatfield and McCoys. This is not just gonna go away. You know what I mean? Like, bro. It's gonna escalate, and I was so upset at her because I'm thinking, did she cause all of this? And I'm like, you could have just waited for your husband to come home, let him deal with the situation. Maybe they could have negotiated something different. I understand her taking out the pole because it was like 4 or 5 dudes, so she felt intimidated. But sometimes it's just smarter to remove yourself from the situation. You know what I mean? And I felt that she caused that whole situation to escalate. In any event, her son, who whips all 5 of those dudes' butts, embarrasses them, and thus they feel like they're insulted, their honor is insulted. So they straight up kidnap this kid and kill him, decapitate him, cut off his hands. It was gruesome. So now she's, as a mother, writhing in pain. The dad that comes on later on finds out what's going on. He's writhing in pain, and she's like verbally attacking him, like, you're just gonna let these guys walk around like this? And I'm thinking, this is all your fault. The whole time I was so angry at her. But then you find out why she's saying that to the husband, because this dude is no joke, cousin. This dude is, if you thought the son was no joke, this dude is no joke. So eventually he tries to avoid. He doesn't want to escalate because he understands what I was saying from the very beginning when I mentioned these are the neighbors. They're going to live in this town. If we go into this war with them, right, family versus family, it's going to end ugly no matter what for both families. So let's just try to, put this to an end right now. He was willing to let it go. He was actually trying to make a concession for his son, where he went around town and was begging at the feet of everyone and kissing the feet of everyone, because he knew, like, man, my son embarrassed these guys. They're going to come after him. He was trying to spare his son. Ultimately, it did not spare his son's life. They ended up killing his sons anyway. He still, at that point, was trying to say, okay, fine, I'll let it go. But they kept pushing him, and then the monster came out. The John Wick came out, and this dude was an absolute savage. Some of the fight scenes were shot so well, Nick. Some of the choreography was so cool. But I just wanted to give a quick synopsis of that's why the wife was really like getting on, like, how are you gonna allow this? Your sons are stepping up, and you're not. To the point where his younger son went and attacked and killed, machete the dude that had his son killed, the head of that family, the patriarch of that family, or whatever. He was throwing bombs out there, and then you find out that this dude was being reserved because he didn't want to unleash the beast. And when he unleashed the beast, buddy, it got absolutely ugly. But this was a powerful film. Whew. Nick, thoughts, my friend?
I kind of feel like, I'm invited to your house for a meal, and this is all you leave me from my apple right here is like that much. This guy just ate the entire thing, for crying out loud. Wow. So, I mean, it's interesting your viewpoints of some of the things that happen. Yes, the wife, she's not going to mess around, but she's always been that kind of character of person. Right. That character has been. It started off with the other guys where they said, we want certain, I think like 3 or 4 acres of your land so that we can do our thing. Your land is in the way of what we want to do, and just sell it to us. And like, no, we're not going to sell it to you. And so then they decided to do, well, then we're just going to, drown you out and take this water. And they said, no one does this canal so that the whole community can share of that water. You can't just keep it on your own. Right. And then she had her back pushed against the wall. And yes, it escalated things. But look at everyone in that family, right? And I think the best way to describe this story and why it makes people feel the way it does, and I really, really enjoyed this movie, is because it's so intimate. You get to know these characters. It's basically this family, and everyone else around that is minor characters. and you learn more about the dad. You learn more about the mom a little bit, but mostly about the dad with going to the flashbacks or whatnot. But this was a family that, you know, they had their farm, they had their way of life. There was no issues beforehand. And then these guys came in. I don't know if they were like, what were they? They weren't oil tycoons. They were something like that. They came in with their money and they just wanted to push their way around. Even when the son, he got arrested for that fight.
Right.
And the rich guys, they kind of used their power for the cops to arrest them. And the cops were like, nothing we can do about this. Sorry. He's going to jail. And so they had made a deal that if the dad bowed down to every single person, that someone get out. So he did that part, humiliating the mom. The wife was upset. The son was upset. How dare you embarrass yourself in our name? But like you said, he just wanted to protect his son. But even with that, his son's got so much, you know, piss and vinegar, if you will, inside him about it that he's like, no. And so the part that you left out, he gets that shoe and just smacks the guy, the big tycoon dude, the guy with all the money, terrifies him, maybe almost had him pee his pants or something. And he's basically like, you know, you do what I say, leave me alone, blah, blah, blah. You knew he wasn't going to stand for that. And then what does the younger son do? Like, to your point, he goes out and he starts trying to assassinate people and throw bombs. This family is just so on edge. It makes you wonder, like, where does that come from? Is it just years of oppression, of being lower class? I have no idea. But you're right. This whole story is Dhanush's story. This is Siva's story. This is his journey. And it's very common for a lot of Indian films that we've seen for them to do the flashback technique where you're going to learn more about the character that way. And I totally dig it because you get piece by piece, milk before meat. You get exactly what you need as you're going on this journey. But the thing I loved about this film, and I've seen it before, I've seen it in Unforgiven with, with Clint Eastwood. I've seen it in 3:10 to Yuma with Christian Bale, where you have these men characters who come off as kind of soft and kind of weak, and they're farmers or this or that. And in 3:10 to Yuma, his son thinks his dad's a wuss. He can't protect the family or do anything. But what they're doing is they've had a history with violence, and they know how consuming that will be in that rage, and they're trying to keep that in bay, and they made a promise with themselves never to go there again, because once they unleash it, there's going to be bodies that are laying left and right. And so you get to learn that story with Siva, where he was younger, and he was working for some other kind of tycoon. I can't remember what it was, some kind of industry, I think moonshine or something like that. And I hate that guy, where he gives this poor guy a job, a very menial job, so that he can have some money for himself and his family. And this guy just kissed the butt of the owner for so long that eventually he got on his right side and not Siva. And so this guy was trying to push Siva out, and he was being violent, and he was messing around with different things, messing with his future wife and all this kind of stuff. But the thing I love about this movie, and we can go on for days and days about the plot, I don't want to spend too much time on that. The thing I loved about this movie is the attention to detail with the characters, the attention to story, the attention to development, the attention to, yes, this is a horrible thing happened, but let's talk about what led up to it. The attention to not always, to your point, reacting in a violent way when someone does something you don't like. You don't always have to go to that pole to the throat when they're doing something you want, even if it's going to hurt your farm, because what are the repercussions? Who are you messing with? And that was a lesson Siva learned, which is why he was willing to bow down. It wasn't a lesson that his wife or his kids had learned. And so you have this whole tragic tale of things unfolding, which with some happy endings at the end when they're going to the courthouse and whatnot. But overall, as a movie, I'm curious, what were your thoughts about it? Because I really enjoyed this movie. You're right. It was dark and it was violent at times. But for me, it didn't take me out of it. I thought it was a very well-made film and a very cautionary and tragic tale of not controlling your anger and your temper.
I mean, for me, I know you just mentioned that you didn't want to go over the entire story of the plot, but I think that's the strongest part of this film, because like you said, kind of like 3:10 to Yuma, you don't understand why he's being so reserved, where, man, I thought at first he was a wuss. Like, yo, they killed your son, they disrespected your wife, they disrespected your land. Yeah, you didn't want to get into it, but now you win it, cousin. He went and begged to the whole little village and kissed their feet and did everything that he had to do, and it still ended up wrong. So these guys wronged you, go for it, man. I mean, it's ugly at this point, but he understood the real world repercussions of that, because in the past, what happened was when he stood up to that other guy, which you mentioned, and I cannot remember that character's name, but basically what happens, everybody's loses, right? Because his bride-to-be ended up getting killed. All the other kids in the village, they set fire to that place. You know what I mean? So yeah, I can take care of myself, but I cannot be there for everyone else. You know what I mean? So my actions have consequences, and he really learned that lesson to the point where, man, it's not worth it. And that's why he made that promise to try to never raise his hand in violence again, because he learned that violence only begets more violence. All right, it's only escalation. So I think that was the main plot and the main theme of this film, and I think that's the strongest part of the film. What I did not like in the beginning of this film, I'll tell you right now, way too much exposition. Now, maybe for us as an American audience, it's tough to follow the exposition because, again, we don't speak the language. We're trying to follow on
fast the subtitles are going.
Subtitles, exactly. But it was like, okay. I even missed the part of them trying to buy the farm at the beginning, like you mentioned, or whatever. I thought that they just bought the land and they were like, look, your land is bordering our land, so we're going to do this. I missed that whole part. So I think that for us, especially, and a foreign audience, too much exposition. You're telling too much of the story in exposition. I don't mind the flashbacks, but you got to give me the flashbacks when you're just giving exposition. Like there was a whole monologue there at the beginning about wealthy landowners and poor landowners, and this is how a story that's happened before, whatever. There was something lost in translation there to me. So I don't know if you felt that way, but I felt that way for sure. Again, you just were able to bring up something that I missed, and I just recently watched this film. Another thing that, like I said, and I almost feel like a wuss saying this, Nick, but I watched this film with my wife, and there were two scenes specifically where it was the decapitation, the flies were around the body. It was so realistic, so hard to watch. And then the school burning, right? When they burned or the house and his wife to be, and she just held out long enough to see him, and she was, bro, those were hard scenes. And I get it is in there for effect, but I'm like, I can't watch this movie with my kids. And I think it's a great film to watch so that you teach them the lesson that, listen, violence only begets more violence, okay? Just because you can retaliate doesn't necessarily mean you can't, you should, all right? There was a story the other day here locally in the news, tragic. Some lady was driving on the expressway, right, in California. Some dude cut her off or whatnot, so she gets upset like most drivers do and flips him off, gives him the bird, gives him the finger. The dude opens fire at her through the expressway, misses her completely, kills the kid in the back seat, in the car seat. You know what I mean? Over road rage. Like, so, okay, fine, he cut you off. You were in the right. I'm not justifying that criminal's actions. And you know what? I hope that he gets caught. To my knowledge, he hasn't still been caught. And when he gets caught, I hope they put him under the jail. But is that going to bring back that 6-year-old? You know what I'm saying? And that was the meaning of the story. In the end, I'm surprised that you said, it had like a happy ending. Did it really? You still lost a son, right? And in the prior life, you know what I mean? You lost that fiance, all those other people in the villages. His brother got killed, as a matter of fact, behind that. And, the first issue of violence. So I think that the moral of the story is that nobody wins, really. Nobody wins. You got two families that are now scarred forever, for life. Yes, we might have lost more people than they might have lost, but does it matter? Is that how we're keeping tallies here in totals? A life's a life, man. If I make an action and I commit something and I do something, Nick, and that's why I was mad at the mom, that cost my kid's life, even if I take the person's life who took my kid's life, is that going to bring my kid back? You know what I'm saying, dude?
No,
so
it's not.
I think that the message behind the film was so good, but because of some of the graphic images, I can't sit down and watch this with my kids. But that's my only problem with the films.
I do think there's a happy ending because, again, you have to understand this is a tragic tale, okay? And obviously there's something in the blood because he resorted to being peaceful before his kids were born, and they still had that innate. Now, he was a little abusive with his younger son, the guy throwing the bombs and whatnot. But with his younger son, his name is right here. It's Shadambram. he has that same anger gene, that same violent gene that his dad had, that his brother had. And yes, there's deaths that happen, and you can't excuse those. You can't, like, oh, not a big deal. Those were big deals. But I believe by the end of the film, his son Shadambaram was finally on the path to change that cycle. His brother's life was ruined. Siva's life, for the most part, was ruined, even though he was able to have a family. But that anger carried on with his kids. His oldest son lost his life. Shadambaram's story has not been told yet. All right. They're going to court. They're going to, give themselves up and take care of that, take whatever kind of punishment, but then he'll be able to move on. And his dad tells me before they get in the courthouse, he's like, I want you to get into politics. I want you to get yourself in education and get in charge of making these decisions so these lower class families like ourselves don't get screwed in the future by these people that just have money or whatever. And he kind of has this smile when he goes in the courthouse. And for me, that was the happy ending, because hopefully that was the beginning of changing that cycle. Hopefully that was a change where they can make change for good, not just for their family, but for other families because of what they went through. And so I do consider that to be a happy ending. The thing that I loved about this movie, and it's going to sound really weird and really morbid, there was so much artistic visual abilities in the cinematography and in the placement. Even the charred bodies, as horrible as that was, the makeup, the aesthetics, everything was just top notch. It looks like they were actually burned. When his son, the flies and everything in the body, that was amazingly shot. As horrible and as morbid as it was, the journeys they go on, that fight in like those dunes in the sand or wherever, the sand was so bright colored, like a reddish orange. Yeah. And I mean, and he was just going out with a spear. There was so much beautiful visuals that it really, for me, it didn't make the tragic parts less tragic, but it helped me to stomach it a little more because of how the visual presence was. And I got to give credit once again, mention the name once, to the director, Vetri Maaran, because I thought that was quite incredible. And this is the last thing I'm going to say before we get to our grade and your final thoughts. I enjoy this movie a lot, but it's been a few months since I've seen it. And when I saw it, it was kind of funny because my family was out of town for a few days. Jody took the kids to her grandparents who are still alive. And so I was at home by myself doing the bachelor thing for a few days. And so I'm watching this movie and my family's not around, right? So imagine that, like, oh, I want to hug my kids or something like that right now. But that was a few months ago, and I'm still thinking about this movie. I'm still thinking about some of the moments. And for me, that's when I know that it's a really good film, in my opinion. Whenever I watch Fast 9, which I'm probably going to watch, I'm not going to keep thinking about 3 days later. I'm telling you that right now. I'm not, unless I'm making fun of it. So I'm ready for a grade. Any other final thoughts before you give your grade?
Yeah, I mean, dude, my final thoughts on this film is that the strongest part of this film, to me, was the narrative it told, right? The story it told. The plot was amazing, and I think that the visuals, to your point, you're right. Some of those scenes were really, really graphic, but they were so believable that it made a powerful impact. Again, the fight in the sand, and I mean, the story it told was something that I think we don't get enough of nowadays, because again, I still would debate with you that at the end, he ends up in jail. His son is going to have to go to court and have to pay some kind of price for this. So yes, while they were able to take out all the other henchmen and the dude from the other family, and the village finally rose up against those people as well, 2 families were destroyed. So the message here is like, look, nobody wins when this happens. That's what I got.
It's definitely not a winner. There's not a winner, but there's a happy ending, I think.
And that's where I was like kind of like stuck with it. But I think that this film is really, I think its strongest suit, should say, is how contained the story is. You know what I mean? Like you said, it was about Shivam. It was about his family. It was about this journey and showing how you could change and why you would change. And he learned that lesson that his kids didn't. And that's why I'm still upset. And even though Manoj did a great job, Manoj Warrior did a good job, when she married him, she knew who he was. So when she made that action, she knew what could happen. She knew those kids had that in her veins. Why? Let the crops die. Let him deal with it. Maybe he wants to deal with it a different way. It could have avoided all of this. You understand what I'm saying?
And I think she kind of blames him for not allowing that to unleash earlier before her son died. And I think she resented him for like, maybe she was waiting, like, are you going to do something? Because I know what you can do. I've heard the stories before I met you. I don't know.
You know what? That's fair. Maybe that was her expectation. But even if he had, let's say he releases the beast earlier, he released the beast before, and it cost him everything. His future fiance, his brother died, all those people died. He can't be everywhere at once. He's protecting you by not unleashing the beast. And I don't understand how she didn't understand that. But with that being said, when a character in a film can upset you in that kind of a way, it's a well-written character. Okay, right. It's a well-written character, and I think that they did a fabulous job. I'm ready to give it a grade. Like I said, I just recently saw this film. I'm ready to give it a grade. Nick, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
You can go first.
You know, for me, I think that this film, if it was an American film, bro, would go right to Sundance. The story is super popular. It would win those kind of film festivals. My biggest issue was, again, the pacing, not necessarily pacing, and that's me as an American because I cannot follow it that quickly. The exposition in the beginning. That's like the only thing where I was like, I understand, you're right. Just because my sensibilities in some of those scenes made me kind of queasy, that's what it's meant to do. It was there for effect. So I'm not going to ding the movie because of that. So just because of it was heavy on the exposition earlier on, I'm going to give it an A-, but it's still a great film. I think it should be watched, and definitely not around kids. Because like I'm telling you guys, I've watched some graphic films. Those two individual scenes still stick with me. Nick?
Yeah, I hear you. I definitely want to mention before I forget how fantastic the acting is. You've alluded to it with Manju Warrior. Dhanush, first film I seen him in, he was fantastic. Again, he totally convinced me he was the younger and the older, and you don't see that too often unless there's a lot of makeup, and even then, it's kind of interesting. I think maybe the only other person I can think of that did a very good job was Brad Pitt and Benjamin Button, to tell you the truth. He's playing like a super old man with all that makeup, but just his manners and everything. So I thought Dhanush was fantastic. I thought all the acting was great. I'm going to give this film an A because it's easily a great film. I'm not giving it A+ just because I feel like as great as the aesthetic was, as great as the visual was, as great as the acting was, I felt like there was just a little something missing. I don't know if it's the son dying too early. I don't know if maybe it's the extra exposition like you talked about. I don't know if it's like you mentioned yourselves, like the wife and the sons just being so quick to violence. Like, have they had issues in the past with everyone else that looked at them wrong where they're just going nuts? There was just something missing where I can't give it that A+, that instant classic, but it's still a very good film. So I'm giving it an A. The question is, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that have seen it, what do you think about our thoughts? Do you agree or disagree? Let us know, both or all. Doesn't really matter. If you haven't seen it, have we convinced you to check it out? I definitely recommend this movie. We saw it, I believe, on Amazon Prime. It should still be there. But with all that being said, thank you so much for listening to our thoughts. And until next time,
we know all things.